Hi, it's Sue. Thanks for joining me for today's Bible reading for April 8th. I'm reading 2 Samuel 13 through 15. Verse 1. After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Amnon was so troubled that he became sick because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed hard to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, and Jonadab was a very subtle man. He said to him, "Why, son of the king, are you so sad from day to day? Won't you tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be sick. When your father comes to see you, tell him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and faked being sick. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make me a couple cakes in my sight that I may eat from her hand." Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go now to your brother Amnon's house, prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house and he was lying down. She took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. She took the pan and poured them out before him, and he refused to eat. Amnon said, "Have all the men leave me." Then every man went out from him. Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the room that I may eat from your hand." Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the room to Amnon her brother. When she had brought them near to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come lie with me, my sister." She answered him, "No, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Don't you do this folly. As for me, where would I carry my shame? As for you, you will be as one of the fools in Israel." Now see this pattern. This is a perfect application for Christian walk for anyone, because you have him, for one thing, who's this so-called friend of his that convinced him to do this foolish thing. And the Bible says bad company corrupts good morals. And so you have not only him being subtle, the same description used for Satan, for the serpent that deceived Eve, right? And I haven't done the word study. I don't know if it's the exact word in Hebrew, but so you have this demon whisper into Amnon through his lust, and then reinforcing it through his foolish friend, and he just falls right into the trap. Like, no discipline whatsoever, no understanding of how destructive this would be for himself and for his family and for the future. He's just so caught up in his fleshly desires, he can't even see, the forest for the trees. And then, so he walks right into it. And even Tamar said, like, you're going to be looked at as a fool if you do this. Don't do it. She's trying to give him, good advice, trying to be his voice of reason, and he doesn't listen. And this is the beginning. This is what I was talking about the other day. This is the beginning of a set of dominoes that's going to bring much destruction. And I guess I'll stop and talk about it here and there. It's a wonderful unfolding of an example of how problems arise in families, in individuals and families and nations. This domino effect from this one sin. And it's interesting, this is chapter 13. So it's one sin that's causing this great landslide to happen that we're going to see unfold. And 13 is kind of a double-edged number. We know everybody's superstitious about 13. I don't believe in superstition, but 13 seems to have, biblically speaking, it's, how do I say this? I don't want to get myself in trouble and say the wrong thing, but it carries both a blessing and a curse. You know what I'm saying? It's like of this number 13, there's also there's not just depicted, just like here, this great sin, but there's also depicted the redemption from the curse, from sin. And that's a whole nother story, but it's interesting that it is chapter 13 here. So coming down here, she's telling him, no, don't do this. And she said, "Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." However, he would not listen to her voice, but being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her with exceedingly great hatred, for the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. See how sin, like a lot of times, this is especially true with new believers and unbelievers, people that haven't developed that temperance of the Holy Spirit, that sin looks so great going into it, and then in arrears, it's just it's a curse. It always rots. It turns rotten, right? So he hated her afterwards, maybe because she had had so much control over him, because he was weak before her. But it says, Amnon said to her, "Arise and be gone." She said to him, "Not so, because this great wrong in sending me away is worse than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant who ministered to him and said, "Now put this woman out from me and bolt the door." Bolt the door after her. She had a garment of various colors on her for the king's daughters, who were virgins dressed in such robes. Then his servant brought her out and bolted the door after her. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her garment of various colors that were on her, and she laid her hand on her head and went her way, crying aloud as she went. So I don't know, maybe he thought that when he took her, she would love him back, and whatever he had daydreamed about. And maybe he hated her because she didn't respond to him in love. She didn't return his love. She probably froze while he's raping her, and it just didn't turn out like he pictured, his fantasy, and probably didn't expect her to go and make it so vocally known, you know. Um, but she did. She made it very well known what happened. So she tore her garment, um, put her hand on her head, and went her way, crying aloud as she went. Absalom, her brother, said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard all these things, he was very angry. Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. So look at all the trouble in the family now because of this one thing. And we're going to see here as we go through, David shouldn't have let Tamar go in there. Maybe he should have been smarter than that, And you see throughout here that David's kind of lenient on Amnon too, which I'm guessing makes Absalom even madder. And later on, Absalom, he revolts against his father. And to me, I'm wondering if it all doesn't go back to this root here of how things were handled. So it says, Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. After 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shears in Baal Hazor, which is beside Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. Absalom came to the king and said, "See now, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." The king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you." He pressed him, however, he would not go, but blessed him. Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." The king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom pressed him, and he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Absalom commanded his servants, saying, "Mark now when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I tell you, strike Amnon and kill him. Don't be afraid. Haven't I commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant." The servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and every man got up on his mule and fled. While they were on their way, the news came to David, saying, "Absalom has slain all the king's sons, and there is not one of them left." Then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. Jonadab, the son of Shimei, David's brother, answered, "Don't let my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men of the king's sons, for Amnon only is dead. For by the appointment of Absalom this has been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. Now therefore don't let my lord the king take this thing to heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for only Amnon is dead." But Absalom fled. The young man who kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming by the way of the hillside behind him. Jonadab said to the king, "Behold, the king's sons are coming. It is as your servant said." As soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. The king also and all his servants wept bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihur, the king of Geshur. David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years. King David longed to go out to Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, since he was dead. Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom. Joab sent to Tekoa and brought a wise woman from there and said to her, please act like a mourner and put on mourning clothing. Please, and don't anoint yourself with oil, but be as a woman who has mourned a long time for the dead. Go into the king and speak like this to him. So Joab put the words in her mouth. When the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground, showed respect, and said, help, O king. The king said to her, what ails you? And she answered, truly I am a widow, and my husband is dead. Your servant had 2 sons, and they both fought together in the field, and there was no one to part them. The one struck the other and killed him. Behold, the whole family has risen against your servant, and they say, deliver him who struck his brother, that we may kill him, for the life is of his brother whom he killed, and so destroy the heir also. Thus they would quench my coal which is left, and would leave to my husband neither name nor remainder on the surface of the earth. The king said to the woman, go to your house, and I will give a command concerning you. The woman of Tekoa said to the king, my lord, O king, may the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and may the king and his throne be guiltless. The king said, whoever says anything to you, bring him to me, and he will not bother you any more. Then she said, please let the king remember Yahweh your God, that the avenger of blood destroy not any more, lest they destroy my son. He said, as Yahweh lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the earth. Then the woman said, please let your servant speak a word to my lord the king. He said, say on. The woman said, why then have you devised such a thing against the people of God? For in speaking this word, the king is as one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring home again his banished one. For we must die and are like water spilled on the ground, which can't be gathered up again. Neither does God take away a life, but devises means that he who is banished not be an outcast from him. Now therefore, seeing that I have come to speak this word to my lord the king, it is because the people have made me afraid. Your servant said, I will now speak to the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his servant. For the king will hear to deliver his servant out of the hand of the man who would destroy me and my son together out of the inheritance of God. Then your servant said, please let the word of my lord the king bring rest. For as an angel of God, bear with me, my alarm. Excuse me. For as an angel of God, so is my lord the king to discern good and bad. May Yahweh your God be with you. Then the king answered the woman, please don't hide anything from me that I ask you. The woman said, let my lord the king now speak. The king said, is the hand of Joab with you in all this? The woman answered, as your soul lives, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right or the left hand from anything that my lord the king has spoken. For your servant Joab urged me, and he put all these words in the mouth of your servant. To change the face of the matter, has your servant Joab done this thing? My lord is wise according to the wisdom of the angel of God to know all things that are in the earth. The king said to Joab, behold now, I have done this thing. Go therefore and bring the young man Absalom back. Joab fell to the ground on his face, showed respect, and blessed the king. Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord king, in that the king has performed the request of his servant. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. The king said, let him return to his own house, but let not him see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and didn't see the king's face. Now in all Israel there was no one to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head there was no defect in him. When he cut his hair on his head, now it was at every year's end that he cut it, because it was heavy on him, therefore he cut it. He weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. 3 sons were born to Absalom, one daughter whose name was Tamar. She was a woman with a beautiful face. Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem and didn't see the king's face. So see, he even named his daughter after Tamar, his sister. So this was a big deal to him. Again, reading between the lines here. He's never gotten over it. Then Absalom sent for Joab to send to the king, but he would not come to him. Then he sent again a second time, but he would not come. So more hard feelings. Therefore he said to his servants, behold, Joab's field is near mine, and he has a barley there. Go and set it on fire. So Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Then Joab arose and came to Absalom to his house and said to him, why have your servants set my field on fire? Absalom answered Joab, behold, I sent to you, saying, come here, that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me to be there still. Now therefore let me see the king's face, and if there is iniquity in me, let him kill me. So Joab came to the king and told him, and when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. So that's interesting. That kind of seems a little spoiled, doesn't it? Like You won't give me what you want. So he goes to this extreme to get Joab's attention. And he's already mad. And he's, if my dad, he brought me back, but he doesn't want to see my face, well, then he must think I'm guilty. So he's saying, like, if I'm guilty, kill me. If not, don't banish me. 15 verse 1, last chapter. After this, Absalom prepared a chariot and horses for himself and 50 men to run before him. He rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. When any man had a suit which should come to the king for judgment, then Absalom called to him and said, What city are you from? He said, Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel. Absalom said to him, Behold, your matters are good and right, but there is no man deputized by the king to hear you. Absalom said, Moreover, oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man who has any suit or cause might come to me, and I would do him justice. It was so that when any man came near to him to obeisance, he stretched out his hand and took hold of him and kissed him. Absalom did this sort of thing to all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. At the end of 40 years, Absalom said to the king, Please let me go and pay my vow which I have vowed to Yahweh in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I stayed at Geshur in Syria, saying, If Yahweh shall indeed bring me again to Jerusalem, then I will serve Yahweh. The king said to him, Go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron. 200 men went with Absalom out of Jerusalem, who were invited, and went in their simplicity, and they didn't know anything. Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, while he was offering the sacrifices. The conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. A messenger came to David, saying, The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, Arise and let us flee, or else none of us will escape from Absalom. Hurry to depart, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down evil on us, and strike the city with the edge of the sword. The king's servant said to the king, Behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king chooses. The king went out and all his household after him. The king left 10 women who were concubines to keep the house. The king went out and all the people after him and stayed in Beth Meroch. All his servants passed on beside him, and all the Cherethites, and all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, Why do you also go with us? Return and stay with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile. Return to your own place. Whereas you came but yesterday, should I today make you go up and down with us, since I go where I may? Return and take back your brothers. Mercy and truth be with you. Ittai answered the king and said, As Yahweh lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely in what place my lord the king is, whether for death or for life, your servant will be there also. David said to Ittai, Go and pass over. Ittai and the Gittite passed over, and all his men and all the little ones who were with him. All the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. King also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. Behold, Zadok also came, and all the Levites with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God, and they set down God's ark. And Abiathar went up until all the people finished passing out of the city. The king said to Zadok, Carry God's ark back into the city. If I find favor in Yahweh's eyes, he will bring me again, and show me both it and his habitation. But if he says, I have no delight in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. The king said also to Zadok the priest, Aren't you a seer? Return into the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Amahaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. Behold, I will stay at the fords in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. Zadok therefore and Abiathar carried God's ark to Jerusalem again, and they stayed there. David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives and wept as he went up, he and his head covered, and went barefoot, and all the people who were with him each covered his head, and they went up, weeping as they went up. Someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. David said, Yahweh, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. When David had come to the top where God was worshipped, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat torn and earth on his head. David said to him, If you pass on with me, then you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and tell Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I have been your father's servant in time past, so I will now be your servant. Then you will defeat for me the counsel of Ahithophel. Don't you have Zadok and Abiathar the priests there with you? Therefore, whatever you hear out of the king's house, tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. Send to me everything you shall hear by them. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. That's it for today. Till next time, feel free to comment your thoughts and take advantage of the email in the description for your free one-year Bible. God bless you. Shalom, shalom.